This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Microsoft Word 1. In this class, I'll be conducting an overview of the ever so popular word processing application known as Microsoft Word. All right, we will kind of discuss some of the fundamentals, just a little bit of what it is, what it does. And then we're going to jump into the Word application or program, and we're going to kind of get the lay of the land. I'll talk about the work area, all right, kind of the mechanics of the keyboard, how we do specific things, all right, just to kind of get us acquainted with some of the really important stuff with Word in terms of your keyboard. And then we're going to look at the menu, and then once we cover that lay of the land, we will then jump into a series of exercises that will get you comfortable using Microsoft Word, skills that will allow you to create and format a basic document. All right, just a quick note that in this class I am using Word 2019, okay, which is one of the more recent versions of the standalone application. All right, but as long as you have access to Word 2007 or later, or even if you have a Microsoft 365 subscription, you will find that whatever you learn in this particular 2019 version can be easily applied to those other versions. All right, not much is different amongst the different versions. So let's just start with a very basic question of what is Microsoft Word? It's a software program for word processing. Okay, just basically another way of saying a software program designed to let you type up a document. It's part of the larger group called Microsoft Office Suite. So if you're not familiar with Microsoft Office is essentially a suite, just as I said, or kind of a package of different programs designed to do different things. So typically when you are getting access to Word, you're usually doing that by subscribing to or purchasing Microsoft Office. And usually it's the home version, which includes the big three, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. All right. So it's part of that suite. And as we're going to see, or if you want to go ahead and explore other Microsoft Office programs, you're going to see that the menu we look at today looks very similar to the menus in other programs, other Office programs, excuse me. So as a word processing application on our computer, Word allows us to type and make changes very quickly. All right, so we can okay, the idea is that we can always go back and forth through the document, right? We type very quickly and we're not stuck with it. Okay, we don't have to work left to right, beginning to end. We could always go back and forth and change things as often as we need to. It easily lets you change the look of your document. So the overall layout or structure of your document, okay, you can change those parameters very easily. And you can move text without retyping. This is a big one. It kind of goes back to what I just said about going back and forth through the document. Okay. Oftentimes we are typing something up, but we decide that we want to put maybe insert a new paragraph between two existing paragraphs, or put a new sentence between two existing sentences, something like that. So we can very easily put things into different places, and we can move text entirely without having to retype the whole thing. So if we decide that this paragraph would actually be better at the end or something like that, we can move it without having to retype the whole thing. All right, so a lot of tools that allow you to, again, create and format a basic document very quickly. And it includes many other features that are explored in our other Word classes. So if you like what you learned here today in Word 1, I encourage you to sign up for Words 2, 3, and 4. All right, so today we're going to learn more about Office Word 2019. We're going to work the 2019 window on our desktop. In other words, like I said, just kind of get the lay of the land. Look at the work area, look at the menu to see how all of it comes together. All right, and then we're going to perform a series of exercises, and which will allow us to create a document. We'll save it, edit it, and save it as often as we need to. More specifically, we're going to be highlighting and formatting text to change the size, style, and font using our tabs and toolbars. We're going to be cutting and pasting and copying and pasting. All right, two very basic yet highly useful tools that we can use not just in Word, but really in any program that we use on a PC. And we're going to use our spelling and grammar check features to look for and fix any errors. And we're going to make a list with bullets or numbers. So I'm going to show you that we tend to think of typing up a document as kind of a normal traditional paragraph-based document, but Word also allows us to very quickly make something like a list. We could even essentially convert a paragraph to a list, and vice versa. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, real quick, before we jump into Word, I do want to get us acquainted with the keyboard. I'd like to cover this in this particular class because Word, of course, perhaps more than any other program, relies heavily on the use of the keyboard. Okay, so just to get ourselves acquainted here, don't worry, we're not going to go through every single key. Only the ones that are really important for today's exercises, especially. So we have our main part of the keyboard here. Now, this keyboard, it likely looks like the one you have in front of you. Okay, unless you're using a Mac, this is a PC keyboard, and it might look a little bit different. But the part I'm drawing around right now, okay, it should look identical, or at least nearly identical to what you have. So in that main part of the keyboard, we have our letter keys here. Remember that on the actual key, it shows the letter in uppercase format, but when you type onto the page, it's going to be shown or entered in lowercase, okay? So though it displays them in uppercase, when you press it, it's going to be shown in lowercase on the page. Now, above the letter keys, we have our numbers, 1 through 0. So if we need numbers, that's where we can go. Now, you'll notice that on those number keys, above the numbers, we have this kind of upper level of other symbols. Okay, so a couple things here. First of all, when we talk about what's on the key, a letter, a number, or a symbol, the general term for all of those things is a character. Okay, so when I say character, I could mean a letter, a number, or a symbol. Okay, it includes all of those. So when we're typing in characters. The other thing I want to mention is that when you have a key with more than one character on it, like we see with the numbers, if you need to get the character in the top level of that key, we need to use the shift key. Okay, there's a shift key on the left, a shift key on the right. You don't need to use both, only one. When you hold down the shift key with one hand, okay, while you're holding down the shift key and you press another key, let's say the number 5, you will get, in that case, the percentage symbol. Okay, so whenever you hold down, if you ever need the top level character of a key, to get it, you need to hold down the shift key. All right, now the shift key also has another, well, it has a few purposes, but another common purpose for the shift key is uppercase letters. So if I need an uppercase A, let's say, I would hold down the shift key, and while I'm holding it down, take my other hand and then press the letter A. And that will give me the uppercase form of the letter A. All right, now there is the caps lock key if you're familiar with it. Caps lock meaning capital letters lock, okay? So if we press that, we could just start typing any of the letters without the shift key and they'll all be in uppercase form. It's not something we use very often, but it is available to you. But typically we're just using the shift key because we're not in the habit of capitalizing every single letter, usually just, you know, first names, last names, and other proper nouns. All right, now, whether you're typing onto a page or writing down onto a page, it is customary, of course, to have spaces between your words, spaces between your sentences. So if you need a space, you have the big space bar down here, the big horizontal key. That's how each time you click it, you get one space. Okay, now another thing that's customary, whether we're typing or handwriting, is to arrange our document into paragraphs, or maybe if we're doing a list, a vertical list, right, with each item on its own line, top to bottom. So when we need to enter a new paragraph to manually go down, we use our enter key. All right, the enter key gives you a new paragraph, or if you're typing up a list, as we'll see later, it will give you a new list item space. Now, oftentimes we need to change something, or we made a mistake, whatever it might be, so we can erase in Microsoft Word, and we could do that. One way to do that is with your backspace key up here in the top right corner, all right? Typically, the backspace key is used for erasing text, and it's called backspace because we erase it from the end to the beginning. So backwards, backspace. All right. Now, we're going to leave this main section for 1 second and talk about the delete key here, which on your keyboard, the delete key may be way up here. All right, just find DEL, or it might be the full name delete. Either way, that's your delete key. And that's another way to erase text as well. All right, but instead the delete key works in the opposite direction. It will erase the text from the beginning to the end. All right, and I think I covered just about everything except one last thing is the arrow keys or directional keys here. All right, so one way to kind of navigate through our document to go up, down, left, right as needed, one way to do that is with your arrow keys. Okay, as I'm going to show you, it's often faster to navigate through your document with your mouse, but the arrow keys are another way to do that, and we'll come to that in just a few minutes. All right, so now that we covered some of those really important keys on the keyboard, let's go ahead and start working with Microsoft Word. So I'm going to put this away, and I'm going to launch Microsoft Word 2019. Now I'm going to launch it. I'm using Windows 10, by the way, in case you're wondering. And in my Windows 10 taskbar, I have an access point to Microsoft Word right here. All right, I have it. We would say I have this pinned to my taskbar. But you can launch Microsoft Word for whatever access point you're used to. If you're doing this alongside with me right now, you can launch Word for whatever access point you're used to, whether you're going to your Start menu and scrolling down to Word under W, okay, or maybe it's saved on your desktop as a shortcut around here. Whatever works for you is fine. Whatever you typically use to launch Word is what you should use right now. So, quick note, now that we're getting into the program, I want to remind you that in GoToMeeting, there is a zoom feature. So if at any time you need to zoom in on my screen to see things a bit closer, if you bring your mouse pointer to the right of the GoToMeeting window, you will see a plus sign to zoom in and a minus sign to zoom out. All right, I believe it kind of pops up and goes away, the zoom feature. So just keep in mind that if you do zoom in, you will not see my entire screen. But you can click and drag with your mouse to move around my screen to see everything. Okay, so just keep in mind, if you are zoomed in more than the normal view, you will not see my entire screen, so you may have to click and drag to move around my screen every so often to see everything I'm doing. All right, so when we launch Microsoft Word 2019 here, we come to a start screen. And you will see this same start screen in other Office applications. The start screen will give you what's called a template gallery, which is what we see on the right here. All right, if you're not familiar with templates, templates are pre-built, or should I say built-in, pre-designed specific types of a file. In this case, we have pre-designed specific types of documents because we're using Word. The idea behind templates is that they basically they save you the work of having to design everything from scratch, and they give you a place to start to save on time. So templates are really kind of used for things that are more graphically rich, things that include pictures, tables, text boxes, all right, things that we'll explore in other Word classes. So for example, if I needed to create a flyer, I can go to one of the suggested searches up here and click on flyers. And I would get a whole bunch of templates based on different types of flyers. All right, you see the first one is a party invitation flyer. All right, so that's what it would look like. So if I selected this, if I click create, it would give me exactly what it shows there. And as you can see, it's already designed. All the text, the size of the font, the way the font is centered, the colors, all those things are there already. All I have to do is erase the generic text that's there and put in my own unique text over it. All right, you can still customize templates. Again, they just give you a place to start. But we're not going to be using a template today, of course. We're going to be building a document from scratch. But I just wanted to show you what templates are in case you ever want to explore them. All right, and by the way, you'll see more categories for templates on the right here. You can scroll down for more. Now let me go back to the main start screen. So I'll click on the back arrow in the upper left-hand corner. And in a second, we're going to go to the very first template that says blank document. Before we do that, I just want to draw your attention to the left side of the start screen here, which gives you a list of recent documents that you've created and saved in Word. Again, you'll see this in all the other Office applications. Okay, so in this case, any Word document that I've created and saved recently will be available in this list, so I can just click on it to get back into that same document and begin working on it again. All right, now mine's cleared out because I like to clear it out before I start the Word classes again. But as we kind of save our work, you'll see that that list is going to fill up with the, Word 1, Word 2, etc. All right, so without further delay, let's open up our document. I'm going to go to the very first template here that says blank document, and technically speaking, this is called the normal template. Okay, but just to be clear, they're calling it blank document, just to let you know that this is where you start a new document from scratch. Let me get rid of that. Perfect. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little better. Let's see, can I zoom in? I think that's good right there. All right, pardon me real quick while I get a sip of water, and then we're going to talk about the work area. All right, so we are looking at a blank document in Microsoft Word. We see basically two things on the screen. We see the actual work area, okay, or the actual, essentially the piece of paper we're typing onto. You could see the left edge or the left side, the right side, and the top here. And if you scroll down, you'll see the bottom eventually. Okay, so that's the actual page we're typing onto. Now, when I bring my mouse pointer down over that page, you'll see that the mouse pointer turns into what's called the I-beam. Okay, the I-beam basically just, you'll see that in other programs, that typically lets you know that you are able to type in this area. Okay, so this is our workable or typable area. More importantly though, you're going to see that blinking insertion point. Okay, oh, and if I forgot to mention, the other part of the screen we see is the menu above, which we'll come to in a little bit. I think I glossed over that. So let's return to the page here. So we see the blinking insertion point, okay? And the insertion point is super important in Microsoft Word. First of all, it lets us know that we're ready to type. So if you see that blinking insertion point, okay, that means that once you start typing, you're going to just, words will fall into the page. And you don't have to follow along with this part if you don't want to. I'm just doing a few quick exercises or examples. We'll do more formal exercises in just a few minutes. So as you can see, the blinking insertion point, once you see it, you could just start typing. Okay, and it is set up in the top left corner of the normal text area, and it as you type, you go from left to right, of course. Now you'll notice that the insertion point follows character by character as you type. Character by character, space by space, until you're done typing, and then it's going to be at the very end or to the very right side of what you just last typed. All right, and that's important because we can relocate or move the insertion point if we need to, which we're doing quite often. Okay, and that's because the insertion point is kind of your guide as to where you are in the document. Okay, if we need to go to a different sentence, we're doing that by moving the insertion point to that sentence, right? And because of that, because it's kind of a locator for things, I always tell people before you make your next move or make your next change, add something, whatever it is. It's a good idea to always locate your insertion point first, because sometimes we inadvertently move it without realizing it, and before we know, we're putting something into the wrong place. Okay, because we moved the insertion point, and now we're typing into the middle of a sentence somewhere. All right, it's not a big deal. We could kind of fix these kinds of mistakes very quickly in Word, which we'll come to in a little bit. But just to save yourself the hassle and save yourself some time, just to avoid these little mistakes, find your insertion point first, okay, just to make sure it's in the right place before you make your next move. Now, how do we move the insertion point in the first place? Well, one way is with your arrow keys like I talked about before, okay, left and right. And if I had more lines on the page, which I don't yet, I would be able to go up and down as well. Okay, so up and down will go line to line. And if you hold down any arrow key, it will move faster in that particular direction, as you can see. All right. Now you can also move the insertion point or relocate the insertion point with your mouse, which tends to be faster, especially if you're going multiple lines or even multiple pages to a different place. So with just one click of the I-beam, okay, you can put that insertion point in a very specific location. So you can be a bit more precise, or more to the point, you don't have to go through several spaces to get to one place. You just go right to where you need with your mouse. As you can see, again, that's just one single click that's allowing me to do that. All right, now another important thing about the I-beam, all right, when I'm waving around with the mouse, is another thing we're often doing with that, aside from relocating our insertion point, is we are selecting text. Sometimes we call this highlighting text. Either whatever you want to call it is fine. Okay, so when we type onto the page, okay, and then we want to maybe go back and format something, change the way it looks, or even maybe delete something, we're often selecting the text first. And we do that by clicking and holding and dragging with our left mouse button like this. Okay, so we just hold down the mouse button, and you can work left to right or right to left, and then you're selecting that portion of text. And you can be as precise as you need to be. You can just select one letter, all right? A couple words, a whole sentence, a whole paragraph, an entire page, an entire document, whatever it is you need to do, all right? And once we select the text, that's when we can start changing the way it looks, okay? Just a couple examples real quick, like font size, okay, font color, all these kinds of things, okay? Centering the font, all right, and numerous things that we will kind of go through as we get through class here. All right, let me just put that back the way it was actually for now. All right, so that's selecting text. Again, that's often the first step before we can apply formatting options. Now, as I type across the page, I want to just talk about another important feature in Word. Bear with me for 1 second. There's an important feature in Word called text wrap. I'm just typing a sentence here. Okay, so what I typed was, as I type from left to right, text wrap will automatically drop the text down to the next line space. So as you saw, as I was typing, in fact, I'll do that last part again real quick so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to type in next, and then when I get to line, the word line, it drops it down to the next line space automatically. All right, so as I type from left to right, I'm going to eventually run out of room on the right side, of course. And when that happens, that means I need to put the remaining part of that sentence onto the next line down. Again, just like if we were handwriting, same thing. So Word will do that for you automatically. There's nothing I need to do to enable text wrap like that. In fact, let's highlight text wrap for a second so we can just remember that important term. Okay, so that's text wrap. Okay, so as you're typing and you run out of space on the right, Word will drop down your line to the next line space automatically without you having to do anything. And by the way, these are called, I'll say, these lines are called contiguous lines, and let me highlight that as well. Oops. My mouse is getting away from me today. There we go. All right, contiguous lines. So when you have multiple lines that are part of the same paragraph, we call those contiguous lines. That's very important to understand when we talk about line spacing and paragraph spacing, something we'll really get into more in Word 2 next week. All right, but Word, the program, recognizes lines versus paragraphs. It differentiates between the two. It actually knows what you're doing essentially. Now, if I need a new paragraph, if I want to drop down to the next line space myself manually, that's when I need the Enter key. Like so, notice how my insertion point dropped down and went back to the left. And here's where we would have a new paragraph. Okay. All right, so this is important, like I said, because there's a difference between line spacing and paragraph spacing. Line spacing here, paragraph spacing here. All right, two different things that we'll talk about more in Word 2 next week. All right, and by the way, when we start new paragraphs, it's kind of conventional or customary to indent the first line of a paragraph. If you need to do that, you use your Tab key on the keyboard like so. And it will move that text over to the right a certain number of spaces. All right, the Tab key is to the left of the letter Q on the keyboard. All right, so we talked about text wrap, we talked about contiguous lines, we talked about paragraphs. One more thing in terms of the page itself. Notice how my insertion point's not starting on the very left edge of the page, and it's not going to the very right edge of the page, okay? It's also not starting at the very top edge of the page either. We have all this space around the text, this empty space. All right, those are called margins. So we have left, right, top, and bottom margins. And they're there to kind of keep the text nice and tidy, prevent it from spilling over the edges of the page, which really keeps it kind of more legible, easier to read. And also, if you were to print it out, it wouldn't look so great if everything was really just touching the edge of the page. All right, we see this on line paper too for handwriting, right? There's typically a line on the left at least, and on the top to kind of keep you from going to the left edge and going to the very top edge. All right, same thing here in a Word document. So those margins, they're built in, and you can adjust the dimensions of your margins. You can make them wider or more narrow. That's something we'll again talk about in Word 2 next week. All right. Also, on the right side of your document, okay, there is a vertical scroll bar over here that allows me to scroll up and down the document as needed. You see the bottom edge down there. And if I created a page 2, I would just keep scrolling down through each. I would scroll down through each subsequent page, so page 2, 3, 4, etc. And I could scroll back up and down as needed. All right, and if you're zoomed in very closely on your page, you will see a horizontal scroll bar at the bottom as well, down here, to scroll left and right. We only see that if we're zoomed in very closely. All right, now speaking of zooming in, I just want to touch on this little bar down here. It's kind of a light gray color. It's like the same color. It's kind of a light gray. It used to be a nice blue color in earlier versions of Word. Now they made it this color, so it's kind of harder to spot, but it is there. That's your status bar. All right, your status bar is a few things worth knowing about. On the very left, you have your page count indicator. Next to that is a word count indicator. Okay, there's let me just see here. Yeah, there's a little kind of spell check shortcut there too. But over to the right, this side, you have some quick ways to change the view of your document. But most importantly is the zoom level there. So if at any time you need to zoom in onto the page itself or zoom out from the page, that's the quickest way to do it. Just use that click and drag on that scroll bar to zoom in and out as needed. All right, now I want to just spend a few minutes talking about the menu above, because this is super important. So the menu above the work area, okay, when we're using Microsoft Office 2007 or later, we call this menu the ribbon. All right, the ribbon is organized by a series of tabs. And I'm going to click on those tabs real quick so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So we start with the Home tab here, which is already engaged. I know it is because that one is, outlined, right? We can see the tab shape above it. And then from left to right, we have, sorry about that, we have Insert, the Design tab, Layout tab, References, Mailings, Review, View, and Help. So as you can see, when you click on a tab, you get a different set of tools in each tab. All right. Now, first of all, you'll see I have this extra tab here called Acrobat. Just ignore that. That's something that's extra, or it's an add-on to my version of Word on my computer. You likely will not have that. So just pretend it's not there. It's not part of the sort of normal version of Word, so you don't need to worry about it. Okay. Another couple other things I want to mention. If you're using a slightly older version of Word, the Help tab might not be there. The Help menu will probably be in the upper right-hand corner by your window display controls, right? I just kind of drew that rectangle up there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, okay? Also, if you're using a slightly older version of Word, your Layout tab might be called Page Layout instead, but it has the same exact tools. They just changed the name of the tab, no big deal. All right. And one other thing I want to mention and remind you of is that this system, this tab system, this ribbon, is the same menu type you'll find in all the other Office applications, PowerPoint, Excel, Publisher. Okay, they use the same system. Now, within each tab is broken down into more specific categories. So right now I'm in the Home tab. Those categories are listed left to right at the bottom here. I'm underlining them, and let's just pretend this one's not here, that's extra. So in the Home tab, in this example, I have all these categories. These categories are called groups. Okay, so I have a clipboard group, a font group, paragraph group, styles group, editing group. All right, so that system of the tab followed by the group is there to help you locate the tool you're looking for. In fact, what we'll be doing today is basically staying in the Home tab and working through our tools group by group. Okay, and I always like to think of the Home tab as kind of a home base. Okay, and you're going to find a Home tab in all the other Office applications. The Home tab is kind of like your home base. It stores the tools that you're likely to use most often for, in this case, a basic document. So the idea is that you don't need to leave the Home tab too much to get to the things you need. Okay, a couple other things. In many of these groups, okay, sometimes we can there's another access point, excuse me, to extra tools. All right, and you'll see a little diagonal arrow in the bottom right hand corner of many of these groups, and we call that a dialog box launcher. Dialog box launcher. So let's go to the paragraph group as an example here. If I click on that arrow, it will launch a dialog box like this. It's kind of like its own little window. All right, these dialog boxes often, they contain the same tools that are in that group up here, but instead of using icons, they lay them out in a plain text format. So sometimes it's actually easier to get to the tool you need through the dialog box rather than using the icons in the ribbon. Okay. Also, these dialog boxes, sometimes they contain extra tools that are not available in the ribbon itself. All right, so sometimes we prefer to use these, sometimes we have to use these. At the moment, however, I don't need to use this at all, so I'm going to go to the bottom right-hand corner and click on Cancel here. All right, one last thing I want to talk about in the ribbon. Again, you're going to find this in the other Office applications. In the top left corner of that ribbon is the Quick Access toolbar. Okay, Quick Access toolbar. You can add additional access points to your favorite tools to this toolbar so you can get to them faster. All right, and the nice thing about the quick access toolbar is that it never changes or goes away. So even if I click on a different tab, let's say, that toolbar, it doesn't affect that toolbar at all. It stays just like it is. So if there's a tool you like to use a lot and you want to save yourself the trouble of having to like drill down through a different tab and maybe even through a dialog box to get to it, you can just add it to your quick access toolbar and it's always right there. So to add tools to that quick access toolbar, all right, just go to the very right of that toolbar. You'll see the triangle with the line over it. That's the icon for more options. Click on that. It will give you a preliminary list of some tools that you can add. You just click on them and they'll be added. But if you want to get to all the tools in the ribbon, click on More Commands towards the bottom. And from this dialog box, you can add whatever tools you need. All right, you can add multiple tools. You just have to add them one at a time. So select the tab in which that tool is found first. And then from this list, select the specific tool you want to add. And then click Add in the middle here. And repeat that same process for each tool that you want to add. And when you're done, click OK in the bottom right, and then they will be available in your quick access toolbar. All right, so I'm just going to kind of go back to square one here. Start off with a blank document. All right, now one more thing I want to point out actually, speaking of that quick access toolbar, let me put some stuff on the page here for a second. In that quick access toolbar, there's that left turning arrow, okay? That's your undo feature. If you make some kind of mistake, okay, you put something in the wrong place, you erase, sometimes we erase an entire paragraph, we don't know what happened, okay? So things like that happen all the time, right? We don't have to panic. If you click undo, it will undo the last change you made, all right? So it will put something back, it will take whatever, take something away, whatever you changed last, it will undo that change to put it back to the way it was before. And each time you click undo, you're going to go back one step in the process of creating your document. So sometimes you need to click it just once, you might need to click it 2, 3 times, however long it takes you to get back to where you want it to be. In fact, I'll click it right now to undo what I just typed. All right, so now that we got all that out of the way, let's get into the fun stuff here. Let's start creating. We're going to create a pretty basic document, okay? And what I'd like to do is first, we're going to kind of get acquainted with some of the keys on the keyboard, and then we're going to start incorporating tools from the ribbon to format our text. All right, so I'm just looking here to see. Let's just start with something very simple, right? I'm just going to put in my first and last name. I may as well put a name on here so I know who wrote it. So my blinking insertion point is ready to go. Sometimes it freezes up, that's okay, it's still active. I'm just going to start typing now. Shift K for the uppercase K for my first name, and then space after my first name, and then uppercase B, and then my last name here. Shift B to get the uppercase B. So there's my name, boom. All right, now that blinking insertion point is at the end of what I just typed. I want to start a new paragraph for my next, what I'm going to do next is type in a few sentences. So I'm going to press the Enter key. And now I'm on the next line space. All right, so I'm going to type in a couple sentences here, and I'll give you a second to catch up, and then we'll move on and we're going to start making some changes to that. All right, so because we're in basically the dead of winter right now, we're going to keep this one winter themed. So our first sentence By the way, our first sentence is going to include some commas, and I'll show you where those are in case you're not familiar. So let's just start by typing in, as the fall begins to wind down. Now I'm going to put a comma here. The comma is to the right of the letter M on the keyboard. There it is. I press, and I'm going to press the space bar after the comma. The air gets colder. Oops. Comma, space, snowflakes. Oops, sorry about my typing here today. Snowflakes begin to fall, comma, space, and people put out holiday lights and decorations, period. Okay, and the period, by the way, I'm not sure if I addressed that. That's the next key to the right, to the right of the comma. All right, so look at the letter M and go 2 keys to the right, and you'll see the period. Now I'm gonna press the space bar after the period, and my next sentence is gonna be much shorter, and that's gonna be it for this paragraph. It is my favorite time of year, period. That's it. And by the way, in case you're wondering, I don't get this question too much, but I may as well address it. It is after a sentence, after the period, it is customary to put in 1 space between sentences. Once upon a time, it was 2 spaces between sentences, but somewhat recently, actually, they basically it just I believe it was Microsoft, but somebody basically said across all programs like this, it's considered customary to have 1 space between sentences. So in case you're wondering, just 1 space. All right, so we have 2 sentences, all right, which make up 1 paragraph here. So let's just start with the keyboard, and then we're going to incorporate some tools from the ribbon. All right, so let's just talk about, first we'll talk about, I guess, let's talk about inserting new text first. All right, we want to add text to this paragraph. So let's say at the beginning where it says, as the fall begins to wind down, I forgot that I wanted it to say, as the cool fall begins to wind down. So I want to add the word cool between the and fall. So the first thing I need to do is relocate my insertion point to that position. And again, you could use your arrow keys up. You could use the up and left to make your way over there. Okay, but it's faster to just use your mouse. So if I just click between the and fall, I can put my insertion point there. Now, so I kind of have 2 choices here. I could click before the F in fall, because remember there's a space between the and fall. All right, so I could put the insertion point either after the E or before the F. So right now it's before the F. So first thing I'll do is type in the word cool. And then I'll press the space bar to put a space between cool and fall. All right, just a very simple exercise in inserting new text in, somewhere in existing text. Now, just to show you, let me undo here. I also could have put my insertion point after the E and the here. And in this case, just done it in the reverse order. Press the space bar first to put a space between the and cool, and then typed in the word cool like so. Boom, simple. All right, so that's inserting text. Now let's talk about maybe basically two things at once: removing or erasing text and replacing that text with something else. So now I want to go over to this word people. I'm selecting it for a second so you can see it better. All right, the word people. I want to change that word to neighbors, and neighbors put out holiday lights and decorations, excuse me. So first I need to erase what's there, and then I can type in the new word. So if I use my backspace key, I'm going to set up my insertion point at the end of that word like it is right now, after the E in people. Remember, just give it a single click to put it where it needs to be. And if you accidentally put it in the wrong spot, maybe before the E or something, then in that case, you could just use your arrow keys to go like one space at a time. All right, so sometimes we kind of combine the two, using our mouse and the arrow keys. Now, since it's in the right place, I can use the backspace key, upper right of that main part of the keyboard, and each time I hit it, I'll erase one character at a time. And after I erase that first P in people, I'll stop right there. And now I could just type in the new word of neighbors. Okay, now I'm kind of changing my mind again. Maybe I do want it to say people put out, not neighbors. Okay, so I'm gonna change it again, back to people. Of course, you might be saying, well, just use the undo feature, but let's just pretend we don't know that exists. So, but this time I'm just doing this so I could demonstrate another way to erase the text. So this time I'll use the delete key instead. So in this case, it would erase the text in the opposite direction, beginning to end. So if I set up my insertion point before the N in neighbors, like so, I can use my delete key, and just like the backspace key, it will erase one character with each click. Now I can type in people. All right, now we're gonna, once again, I'm looking at it, say, you know what, I should have stuck to neighbors. All right, we're gonna go with neighbors. That just sounds better. It's more of what I'm trying to say. So we're gonna change people to neighbors again, but this time we're gonna do it another way, a faster way. Because what I want to show you is you can combine selecting text with your backspace or delete keys to remove or erase text much faster. So instead of erasing it character by character, okay, we could just erase it essentially as a block. We can erase the entire word with one keystroke. So if we want to do that, we need to target or select the entire word. How do we do that? With the click, hold, and drag method I showed you before. So if I work from left to right, I'll just bring my I-beam before the P in people. Don't worry about the insertion point. In this case, we don't really need to worry about it. And I'll just click, hold, and drag left to right until the word people is selected like so. And a little tip, if you ever need to select an entire word, no more, no less, one word exactly, instead of clicking, holding, and dragging, you can also double click onto that word, and that will select the entire word. No more, no less. So either click, hold, and drag, or double click, whatever way you prefer. And now if I hit the backspace or delete key, it's going to erase the entire thing as a block like so. All right, so it was faster than going letter by letter, right? We just selected it, pressed the delete key once or backspace key once, and now it's all gone. And you could use that for, you know, anything. One word, one sentence, one page, whatever it might be. All right, whatever you select, it's going to erase it all in one shot. So now I'll type in the word neighbors. And this time it also took with it the space after people. So I'll just add the space back myself here between neighbors and put. All right, so these initial exercises, pretty simple. I just wanted to get you acquainted with the keyboard, all right? And perhaps more importantly, how we move that insertion point to specific locations to change or format our text in any number of ways, okay? So before we start making more changes using tools from the ribbon, we may as well go ahead and save all of our hard work so we don't lose it. So I'm going to go to my File menu in the upper left corner next to the Home tab, and I'll go down to Save As. It's the first time we're saving it, so it's going to be a Save As. But even if you click on Save by accident, it's still going to take you to the Save As screen anyway, okay? And I'm going to save it on my computer. I don't want to save it on my Microsoft OneDrive account. If you're familiar with that, don't worry about it. We're not going to use that. We're going to click on this PC, which is going to save it to our actual computer. And then we'll come down here and click on Browse to browse the folders in my computer and select an appropriate folder for this document. And if you're using a slightly older version of Word, the Browse button might be over to the right. Wherever you see Browse, click on it. And it takes me to my Save As dialog box. And these Microsoft Office applications, Word, PowerPoint, Excel Publisher, all right, they will, in most cases, they're going to take you automatically by default, they're going to take you to your main Windows Documents folder. That's where they're going to put you to start. So right now I'm looking inside of the main Documents folder. You could, of course, save this in any folder you want. This is just where it's putting you as a default, because it's just assuming you want to put this document in your Documents folder. Now, in my Documents folder, I have a more specific subfolder called Class Samples. That's where I want to put this. So I'm going to double click to open up that subfolder here. All right, if you look at my file path, now I'm inside of the Class Samples folder. Now that I've selected a folder, I'm going to come down to File Name and give it a more unique name. Right now, it's filling it in with my first and last name. Okay, it's doing that because that's the first thing I type into the document. Again, Word just does that automatically, but you can change it. So I'm going to erase that. Again, backspace or delete key is fine to do that. And I'll call this Word 1 Practice. And then I'm going to go down the bottom right-hand corner and click on Save. So we selected a folder, then we gave it a name. Now we're going to click on Save. And now we're all set. Now, as we make more changes, it's always a good idea to save, save, save. Every time you make a change or add something, whatever it is, save it. So you update that document. All right. And to do a quick save, we don't need to do that whole process again, of course. We can either go to our File menu and click on Save here, which will just update it immediately. We can also use the Save Disk icon in our Quick Access toolbar in the upper left-hand corner, which should be there already on your end. All right, that little Save Disk there. That will also be a quick save. Either one is the same thing, either place. All right, so let's go back down to our paragraph. And I want to start, we're not going to go exactly in order, but we're in our Home tab. I want to start with the font group here. Okay, these are the tools in the font group. You know, Word users, we use this all the time, these tools, to do things like change the size of our font, change the look of the font, okay, different font type, maybe the color of the font, maybe to emphasize specific words. So we're going to talk about some of those tools right now. So first of all, let's start with size and font, okay? I want to change the size of my, basically everything, Okay, actually, let's do just the paragraph here. I want to change the size of the font for this paragraph. We're gonna just ignore our name above. Okay, so in our font group, you will see what will likely be an 11. Okay, 11 is considered the default font size for Microsoft Word, meaning that when you start a new document like this, it's going to be set to 11. You can change that, but in the sort of in the kind of out of the box version of Word, okay, that's how it's going to be arranged. That's how it's going to be configured, size 11. So let's just say we want to make it 12. We want to make it a little bigger. Let's make it 12. So first thing, before I can change the size of the font, I need to tell Word what font it is I want to change the size for. So I'm going to select that paragraph by using the click, hold, and drag method. Left to right for the first sentence, and then if you just bring your I-beam down, it's going to select each subsequent line as an entire block. So again, your first sentence, go left to right, and then as you move the I-beam down on the right side of the screen there, keep it on the right, by the way, it's going to highlight all the other lines as a block immediately, like so. Okay, and once again, a little bonus tip here. Before we talked about the double click to select one word, you may not know that a triple click 1, 2, 3 will select an entire paragraph, no more, no less. So you could either use the click and drag method to select this whole paragraph, or use the triple click method, 1, 2, 3, and it will yield the same result. So I'm going to go to my font group, go to the 11, and click on the drop-down arrow next to the 11, and you'll get other font sizes. Now, this is just a list of some font sizes, so you could use one of the ones from this list if you want. Otherwise, you can just type directly into the box itself by using your backspace key to erase what's there and typing in a different number. So, for example, if I needed, let's say, I'm just looking here, if I needed size, 21, just pulling out a random number. 21 is not available in this list, but I could type in 21 if I want to be more precise. You can also do half sizes. So if I wanted it to be 10.5, 11.5, Word supports that as well. All right, but in this case, I want it to be 12. So I could either type in 12 and then press enter, or just click on 12 from the list. And you'll see that when you point at font sizes, it will give you a preview of how it's going to look before you even click it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on 12, and there's size 12. All right, now I also want to change the font type. So I'm going to leave my paragraph selected. If you unselected it, by the way, to unselect or deselect, just click anywhere outside of that selection, and it will just get rid of the highlight. Okay, so let me reselect that paragraph. I'll use the triple click method, 1, 2, 3. Oops. Now I want to change the font. So again, I go up to the font group in my home tab, and next to the font size to the left is the font. Okay, which is, again, should be set to Calibri. That's the default font in a new Word document. Now, if I click on the drop down, I'll get many other font types. Okay, under all fonts, you'll see a lot of stuff listed here. It's all arranged alphabetically. And like your font sizes, if you point at any of these fonts, it will give you a preview of what it looks like. All right, now I'm not going to do anything crazy here. I'm going to use another kind of standard font type, formal font. I don't want to use Calibri, but I will use one called Times New Roman, which is often what we need to use for specific types of documents. All right, sometimes Times New Roman is what's required. especially for things like academic essays, things like that. So I'm going to scroll down to the T's, and there's Times New Roman, and I'll click on it, and now I change the font in this paragraph to Times New Roman. And remember, if you have multiple fonts in a document, which typically you don't do that, but let's just pretend you have multiple fonts, multiple sizes. If you're not sure what a specific portion of a text is, what font is this, what size is it, if you select that portion of text, just look up there in the font group and it will tell you. Like, for example, if I select my name, it's going to change up there, Calibri 11. If I do the paragraph, Times New Roman 12. All right. All right. Another common feature or another frequently used tool in your font group is are your emphasis tools. Okay. So sometimes we want to emphasize a specific word, a specific sentence, whatever it might be. Okay. This is kind of a visual tool for the reader. So when they're reading it, certain things stick out. So you're making sure that the reader definitely sees this part because it's very important. So you're emphasizing specific parts of your text. So in your font group, you have your emphasis tools here, B, I, and U. And I should mention too, whenever you point at any tool in the ribbon, just leave your mouse pointer there and you'll get a little tag that tells you what that tool is and in some cases what it does. So if you're ever unsure, is this the right tool? I'm not sure. Just point at it, leave it there for a second and it will tell you what it is. Okay. So we have our emphasis tools, B, I, and U. B is for bold, I is for italic, and U is for underline. 3 different ways to emphasize text. So let's start with the B for bold. All right, so I want to emphasize the word cool, the cool fall. I just want to emphasize the fact that it was cool. Okay, so you just remember the fall is cool. Cool weather, cool temperatures. So the first thing I need to do is select the text that I want to emphasize or format. So I'll select only the word cool. Remember, you could also double click it because it's just one word. Now, if I go up to the font group, click on the B for bold, you'll see that the font is now thicker and darker, and that's bold font. So it just stands out a little more than the other text. Okay, and a lot of these tools and a lot of other tools, they're kind of like on and off switches. All right, so if I select that word again, you'll see that the B is shaded in, okay, which is indicating that that particular formatting command has been applied to that selected portion of text. And if I want to remove the bold, I just turn it back off by clicking on it again like this. So off, on, off, on. Very simple. All right, now we're going to skip the I. Let's go to the U first for underline. All right. I want to emphasize colder now because we said that the fall is cool. Now it's getting colder. I want to emphasize colder. So I'm going to select the word colder. I can either click and drag or double click it. Okay, remember, it's only selecting the word. Notice it's not grabbing the comma because that's not part of the word. And I'll go up to the font group. This time I'll click on the U for underline. And if you look at the word, now it has an underline. Okay, underlines we often see, I would say, not necessarily in like lines of text or lines of paragraphs, but oftentimes for headers or headings, like titles, oftentimes they're underlined, but we can also use it in this case for like emphasizing things as well. Okay, you will see it sometimes as an emphasis tool, but the one that I would say is perhaps used most often is the one we haven't talked about yet, the italic, which is the letter I up there. So italics will put your lettering or your characters, your font, on a slight angle. And we see italics perhaps more often than these other two because we don't just see them in like Word documents or online documents. We see them in newspapers, books. All right, we see them in many places. So italics are not, they emphasize the text visually, but they're also words in italics are meant to be read a specific way. So that's why I wanted to save this one for last because it's a bit more nuanced than the other two. So let's say I want to stress that this is my favorite time of year, which it says at the end there, right? It is my favorite time of year. Let's say that before this, I was telling you about the other seasons, spring, summer, fall. I was talking about what I liked about each. Then we come to winter, and I want to emphasize it is my favorite time of year. Okay, so I'm going to emphasize the word favorite. So I'll select favorite. I'll click on the I for italic, and now you can see that the font is on a slight angle, and also the font also changed a little bit. Like look at the letter A compared to the other A's in the paragraph, it looks a little different. Okay, but those are italics. All right, and like I said, it's meant to be read a specific way. So instead of reading it as it is my favorite time of year, I would read this as it is my favorite time of year. Just to stress that this is my favorite time of year as opposed to the other three seasons. All right, now after all this hard work, I'm going to do a quick save. So I'll go to my File menu, click on Save here. Remember, you can also click on the Save Disk in your Quick Access toolbar. All right, now you have some other tools in your font group. I won't go through all of them because the ones we just covered right now are kind of what I would say are the most frequently used. But you do have in this little section here, all right, different ways to kind of change the look of your font, add a little bit more, I guess we'll say artistic flair. For instance, this one is text effects and typography. All right, so you can add like shadows or glows to text, things like that. The next one is text highlight. So if you want to highlight the text so it looks like a highlighter, that's available. And the next to that is font color. So if you want to change the actual color of the font itself, like perhaps maybe snowflakes, I'm going to put that in a blue color to indicate, blue is usually used for cold snow. So if I select the word snowflakes, I can go up to font color. I can click on the drop down for more color choices. And if you don't want a color from this initial palette, you'll see more colors here for even more. But I'll just use one of the ones from here. I'll select this blue, and now I change the color of that font to blue. Okay, and just so you can see the difference, this is how highlight would work. Oops. Notice how it's highlighting the background of the text, whereas font color is changing the color of the text itself. All right, and there are some more tools up there that you can kind of peruse, explore when you're practicing, like strike through and your superscript and subscript tools. And if you ever have questions about those, remember you could always just kind of shoot us a quick email to our tech class email account, all right? But I just want to kind of move on to start talking about the paragraph group because like I said, we did kind of cover the most frequently used tools in the font group by now. Okay, your font size, your font, and your emphasis tools, bold, italic, and underline. Now, the next thing I'd like to do we're actually going to leave the Home tab for a second. I would like to now create a list of my favorite things about winter. I'm going to create a list of my 5 favorite things about winter. But I want to put that list on a separate page, a page 2. So let's go over a few things first. First of all, to do that, I need to go to my Insert tab. So up there in the ribbon, if I click on the Insert tab right next to Home, over to the left in the Pages group, you will see Page Break, because we are inserting a page break. One second here. All right, now before I do that, we need to talk about the insertion point again, because that's going to dictate where the page break takes place. Now, if you think about how we talked about text wrap and how the lines wrap automatically as you type down the page, right? We think about that versus entering a new paragraph manually. That's when we essentially force the insertion point down to the next line space when we need to. All right. So automatic text wrapping versus inserting or entering a new paragraph manually. We can say the same thing about pages in Microsoft Word. As you type down the page, when you run out of space at the bottom, you will automatically get a page 2. And you can just keep typing continuously. You don't have to do anything. Just keep typing. You come down to page 2, you'll get a page 3 automatically, and so on and so forth. So Word will just give you new pages continuously, automatically. All right. However, when we want to insert a new page before we've reached the end of the current page, like we do right now, we need to insert a page break manually. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of like the idea of inserting a new paragraph. All right, because we're doing it manually. So because we haven't reached the end of this page yet, we only have 3 lines on the page. If we want a page 2, we have to insert it ourselves. So make sure your insertion point is at the very end of your sentence, like mine is right now, and then I'll go up and click on page break. And as you can see, it gives me a page 2. Notice the literal break between page 1 and 2. All right, usually what I do is I just use my scroll bar to scroll down a little bit, so I'm only looking at page 2 like this. All right, and if you look at your status bar down here, you will see that it now says page 2 of 2. So I have 2 pages in my document currently, and I'm looking at page 2. Now, real quick, before we start entering more text, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of that insertion point. All right, let me undo real quick. If my insertion point was, let's say, here, before that sentence is my favorite time of year, if it's there and I insert a page break, what's it going to do? It's going to take everything to the right of it along with it. Okay, so this is another important fact about the insertion point. Whatever is to the right of your insertion point, depending on what you're doing, it will be carried with it. All right, so if I insert a new page, like we just did, if I insert a new paragraph, so if I put the insertion point before the air gets colder here and press enter, what's it going to do? It's going to give me a new paragraph, but also take all that text to the right as part of that paragraph. All right, so just something to be aware of, okay? Typically, if there's text to the right of your insertion point and you're inserting a new line, a new paragraph or page, it's going to be taken along with it. So let me undo again and just do it properly this time. So I'm going to move my insertion point first by clicking, single click with my mouse, and then I'll insert the page break. Perfect. Let me do a quick save to update my document. I'll use the save disk in the quick access toolbar. Now in a second, we're going to move, I'm going to go back to the Home tab. And we're going to move over to the paragraph group, talk about some of those tools. All right, the paragraph group is where you go to adjust your line and paragraph spacing, where you can adjust your alignment. Okay, so as a default, we're set up left aligned, which means we're on the left margin, but we can center and also right align. It's also where you go to do things like add bullets and numbering to create lists, and also to sort. You can actually rearrange lines of text in a certain order without having to do it yourself, like alphabetically maybe, or in numerical order, things like that. But we'll come to that in a few minutes. Let's just start by typing onto page 2 the title of our list, which is going to be my 5, or if you want, you could use the number 5 for this because we haven't used any numbers yet. My 5 favorite things about winter. And I'm capitalizing the first letter of each word there because it's title. All right, title case. So, oh, by the way, before I forget, notice how we're still using Times New Roman size 12 here. It didn't revert back to Calibri 11. Why? Because this is coming after, or should I say the last thing we typed before that title was Times New Roman 12. Okay, so it's kind of the same idea that I just talked about with things to the right of the insertion point. All right, so at anything that if you change your form, if you change certain formatting for a sentence, a paragraph, whatever it might be, all right, generally speaking, anything you create after that sentence or paragraph, okay, whatever you last typed, those changes will still be in place. Unless you want to go back to the way it was, you don't have to, whatever it is you need to do. Just something to keep in mind. All right, but I'm just going to leave it Times New Roman 12, that's fine. So the next thing I'd like to do before I create the list itself, this is a title. What do we often do with titles? We center them. We center them on the page horizontally, left to right, put it in the center. So let's go to our paragraph group here. So in the paragraph group, we have these 4 tools right here. We see these 4 sets of lines, okay? And if you point at them, you will see that those are your alignment tools. The first one is align left, and then we have center, then we have align right, and then we have justify. So let me just erase that circle. So if I want to center this, what do I need to do first? Select the text. And because it's technically its own paragraph, I could triple click it. Now I can go up to the paragraph group and click on the icon for center alignment, and now it's centered on the page. And just to show you, right alignment would bring into the right margin like this. Okay, and justify, you're not really going to see any effect. We don't use justify too often. It just distributes the text evenly between the margins. It's something we often see with newspapers or magazines. If you want everything to touch the left margin, everything to touch the right margin evenly, that means that you have to some lines, the spacing between letters will be very tight. Other lines, the spacing between letters will be further apart. It's kind of hard to explain, but again, you've probably seen it in magazines and newspapers where they use justified alignment. But usually we don't see that in Word documents like this. All right, so we use center alignment, great. Now my insertion point's after the title. I'm going to press enter because I want to start a new paragraph. Notice, what did I just say before about the font and the font size? Because the last thing I typed was center aligned, I'm still in that center aligned, we'll call it a mode, right? Notice where the insertion point is, it's still centered on the page. So now we just need to manually change it back to left. So if I go up to my paragraph group, click on left aligned, it moves the insertion point back to the left margin. So now I'm going to type in my items, my 5 favorite things about winter. I'm going to start with hibernating. Okay, now what I'm doing here is I'm creating a list, my 5 favorite things, creating a list. How do we typically arrange lists? Well, vertically, right? And each item has its own line. I wouldn't say necessarily that each item is only one word, but the item itself, right? We only do one item per line. So what do I need to do now? Press the Enter key to start a new paragraph. The next one will be snowy days. I'll press Enter for the next item. Well, let me scroll down a little bit. Sorry about that. I forgot to change that. That's better. All right, the next one will be feeding the birds. I'll press Enter here. Building a snowman. Enter one last time for hot chocolate. Perfect. Let me do a quick save to update my document. So now we have our 5 favorite things. Now, in a minute, we're going to make this a proper list by adding bullets or numbers, which we often do with lists, right? Sometimes we do little bullets next to each item or we number them. We'll come to that in a minute. First, I want to talk about sorting. Word actually allows us to rearrange paragraphs, okay, based on some criteria. In this case, we might want to alphabetize them A to Z. All right. So the first thing I'll do is select the paragraphs that I want to sort. And by that I mean, basically in this case, we're selecting the list items because they're each their own paragraph. So I'll start with hibernating and then I'll just work down. Remember, select your first paragraph left to right, and then just bring your mouse pointer down each other line, and you'll highlight them as block. Now I'm going to go ahead and sort them alphabetically. So I'll go up to my paragraph group, and you'll see a little icon with an AZ and a down arrow. That's your sort tool. Click on that. You'll get a dialog box. You can sort by different things, not typically you sort by paragraphs. That's how we're doing it, but you can do it by headings and other things. Just leave it as paragraphs, and we're going to leave it as text. We have no numbers or dates or anything, so we're going to sort it by text. And then we have ascending or descending. Ascending is A to Z. So basically, we don't need to change anything here. Leave it as paragraphs, text, ascending. We click OK. And now it's in alphabetical order. B, F, H, I, H, O, and then S at the end. Let me do a quick save. Now I want to, again, make this a proper list. Let's start with bullets, and then we'll do numbers. So once again, I need to tell Word what paragraphs I want to add bullets to. Or another way of saying that would be which paragraphs I want to convert to a bulleted list. That's essentially what we're doing. We're actually converting this to a different type of document. So I'm going to select, just like I did before, each item in the list. Now in the paragraph group, in the top left corner of that group, you'll see the bullets tool. It looks like 3 dots. Now, if you click that icon, you will get solid bullets. If you don't want solid bullets, you want a different type of bullet, you can click on the drop down next to it to get different bullet types, like we see here. And once again, if I point at them, I'll see how it impacts the text on the page. All right. So maybe I like the diamonds here, so I'll use that. So with just one click, it will add bullets before each paragraph. And now I have basically a proper list. All right, now a few things here. First of all, remember what we just talked about with the last thing you did. Those changes stay in effect, which means that if I press enter after my last list item right now, what is it going to do? It's going to give me another bullet because it's going to keep me in that bullet mode unless I change it back. Also, if I create a new paragraph between existing paragraphs, same thing, I'm going to get another bullet like this. Okay, now so let's go to the last item again. I'll press enter. If I want to go back to normal paragraphs, I would just create the new line like I just did, go up to the paragraph group, notice how the bullet icon is still turned on. Click on it to turn it off. Notice your insertion point moves back to the left margin, and now you're back to just normal paragraphs. Okay. Now, another thing, as you just may have noticed, when you add bullets or numbers, Word automatically indents each of those paragraphs further to the right. All right. Notice how I had to press the backspace key to go back to the left, like this. Okay. So Word, when you add bullets or numbers, Word indents each paragraph further to the right. If you want to decrease the indent, like go back to the left or make it further to the right, in the paragraph group, you have your decrease and increase indent tools here. There's a left arrow for decrease, a right arrow for increase. So if I select all those list items again and press decrease indent, they'll all move back to the left. Increase goes this way, et cetera, et cetera. All right, but I'll just leave it as it was. I think it's fine. Okay, and notice when I select list items, the actual bullets themselves do not highlight. They're not part of the selection. Don't worry about that. We're gonna circle back to that in a little bit. Okay, and another thing that happens, which we won't really get into now, we'll talk about it in Word 2. When you add bullets or numbers, the spacing between the paragraphs changes. Okay, it actually decreases. We'll touch on that more in Word 2 because that's a little more involved, changing that back. So in Word 2, we'll talk about line and paragraph spacing, and I'll show you how to make it change the paragraph spacing back to what it was if you want to. All right, so there's our bulleted list. Now, if I want to make this a numbered list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't have to remove the bullets and then add the numbers. I can just replace the bullets with numbers. So I'll select each item like so. And now I'll go up to the paragraph group, and this time, instead of the bullets, go right next door to where it says 1, 2, 3. That's your numbering tool. Once again, if you click on the drop down, you'll get different types of numbers depending on how you want it to look. You have Roman numerals. You could even do letters. All right, I'll just use this one here and click on it. And there we go. And once again, if I press enter between existing items, it will just renumber everything, and in this case, give me a new 3. Okay, if I press enter after the last item, I'll get a 6. It will keep me in that numbered list mode until I decide to turn it off, if I have to. Let me do a quick save. Okay, now, and again, all the same things apply to numbers like we saw with bullets. It will continue the numbered list until we turn it off. It indents everything to the right, and the spacing between items decreases. Same thing. One more thing, again, I won't go into too much detail about this, but I do want to just show you that another thing that Word allows you to do is create outlines with bullets and numbers. So aside from just lists, you can create more of an outline. You know, if you're outlining a paper you're writing, outlining directions for somebody, maybe you're, sometimes instructions, they're easier to do with an outline form where we have like a main heading, a subheading, details, and then the next heading, subheading, etc. So using a combination of Enter and Tab keys, we can create what's called a multi-level list, which is basically just an outline. So if I press Enter, for example, for a new list item, and then I press Tab to indent, notice I get a bullet instead of a number. Okay, because that would be the next level in my outline. So let's pretend that this is our heading, and now I'm creating a subheading. And if I press Enter and then Tab again, I get a different type of bullet for some kind of detail. So notice it's going left to right, that kind of hierarchy, okay? So Word allows you to create what's called a multi-level list, and we use multi-level lists typically for, like I said, outlines or maybe instructions for somebody. Let me just, actually I should just use undo to go back to the way it was. Let's do that real quick, and there we go. I'll do a quick save. All right, so we've established creating a list. Great. At this point, we've covered most of the stuff in the paragraph group. We didn't get to line and paragraph spacing because, like I said, that's a little more involved. We're going to get to that more in Word too. Okay. There's also shading here where you can shade in behind like a paragraph. So it's kind of like the highlight tool, but instead it's going to do it in more of a kind of do the whole, whatever you select. So instead of each line, notice how it's highlighting basically the entire thing left to right, margin to margin instead. All right, you also have your borders tool here if you ever want to put a border around a specific line of text or a border around an entire paragraph. You can do that with your borders tool. You typically just select the portion of text or the paragraph first, and then you apply the border. All right, so we've talked about a lot of the tools in the paragraph group. I actually want to move back to the left and talk about the clipboard group. So your clipboard group has your cut, copy, and paste tools. If you're not familiar, cut, copy, and paste allow you to move text or copy text and paste it in a new location. And there are other ways to do this. If you're familiar with cut, copy, and paste, and you're used to doing it, for example, with your right click or with just your keyboard, that's fine. I'm just going to show you how to do it in the ribbon. So it's just to stay consistent. So let's say I want to take this list, or I want to take the whole thing, the title and the list, and I decide that I want to move the whole thing to page 1. All right, I decide, I don't want it on a separate page. I want to put it on page 1 underneath that paragraph we typed before. So in this case, if I just want to move it entirely, that would be a cut and paste because I'm going to cut it from one location and paste it to a new one. So cutting and pasting, basically a 4-step process. Step 1 is to select the portion of text that you want to cut. So I just did it, I'll do it again. Select my title, and then just everything in the list here, all the list items. Step 2 is to then cut it. So I'll go up to the clipboard group and I click on cut. Now it looks like I deleted it. I didn't. It's kind of like hovering in the background of what's called the clipboard. So it's still there, just not on the page. Now, step 3 is to assign a new location for that portion of text. So I'll scroll up to page 1. And how do I establish a new location? With my insertion point. So I will click. Oh, there we go. I'm going to put it underneath this paragraph. Now, because I have not created a new line under this paragraph yet, there's nothing there. You could press enter after the paragraph to start a new empty line space, or you can double click with your mouse and you'll put and you'll basically create a new line that way instead. So instead of a single click, you can do a double click. If you're having difficulty with that, because sometimes you have to place your mouse just right, you could just press enter after the paragraph. That's fine. So now I have a new line under that paragraph. So now I come to step 4, which is to just go ahead and paste it. So I go back up to the clipboard group and I click on the paste icon, the clipboard itself, and there it is. All right. And you'll notice that even though when I selected, it did not select the numbers were still grouped in with that selection. All right, it's just because of the way, it's basically because of the fact that we didn't enter the numbers ourselves. Word basically put them there for us. It's just not part of the selection, because when you select things, typically you're selecting things that you typed in, but it was taken along with it, or the numbers were taken along with the selection. All right, so again, 4 steps. Select the portion you want to cut. Step 2 is to cut it. Step 3, assign a new location by relocating your insertion point. And then step 4, paste. So now let's talk about copy and paste, which is the same exact process, just a different operation, different function. So let's say I want to duplicate this. I want to copy it. I want this list on page 1, and I also want it on page 2, which still exists, by the way. It's still there, page 2. So same thing. I'll select the portion that I want to copy first, like so. Step 2, click on copy. So I'll go up to the clipboard group, I'll click on copy. Okay, this time it didn't go away because I'm copying it, so it stays there. I'm just creating a duplicate. Step 3, assign a new location by relocating my insertion point. So I'll scroll down to page 2 and just give it a single click. It looks like it's still, all right, this line is still centered. That first line, notice where my insertion point is, so just be careful. I'll go up to the paragraph group, I'll click on left align, because that may affect the paste. Now, I go to step 4 and paste it, so I'll go to the clipboard group, click on paste, and there it is. So now I have a copy on page 1 and a copy on page 2. Okay, and if you ever run into this situation, I'll show you real quick. With numbered lists, this happens sometimes. Notice it says 6 through 10 on this page, 1 through 5 on the first one, 6 through 10 on the next. Okay, that's because it is treating it as one big list. Even though it's a copy, it's Word is still thinking that maybe you're just creating, or that you're continuing the same list onto another page. Okay, so now it's enumerating them 6 through 10. The quickest way to fix this, you will see underneath the list, this little mini toolbar pops up, this little drop down. If you click on that, it says paste options. All right, and you'll see the one that's turned on is called continue list. If I go to the next one, it's called new list, and now we'll treat it as a new list. So it's going to start over 1 through 5. So I click on that, and now I'm back to 1 through 5. All right, now we are almost out of the woods here with our document. We're in the home stretch. I'm going to grab a sip of water, and we're going to do one more thing, and we're going to wrap it up for the day. 1 second. All right. So at this point, we've stayed in the home tab. We talked about the clipboard group, the font group, and the paragraph group. Okay, just to kind of briefly go over, so your styles group, not something that I use very often. Whenever you're using Office, no matter what program it is, and you see something called styles, typically that means it's some sort of built-in kind of pre-formatted set of options, if that makes sense. So like if you look up there, you'll see paragraph no spacing, okay, or heading 1. So like depending on how you want headings to look, how you want your paragraph spaced, you can just select one of these styles and it's all built, it's a combination of formatting commands built into one. So instead of having to do things piecemeal, it's all built into a style. Again, it's not something I use very often, but you could always try it out just to see if you like it. Okay, emphasis, we have some italics here, so you can create your own styles and save them, so you can just pull from them whenever you need. So something you might want to explore when you're practicing, but not something we're going to get into here, because what I'm showing you today is basically how to do a lot of these things, again, like piecemeal, right, from scratch. Also, the editing group, we're going to talk about this more in Word 2. The editing group has tools that allow you to quickly sift through large amounts of text and look for something specific, maybe select something specific, maybe change something specific. So if I'm looking for a certain word or someone's name, let's say I have 20 pages and I'm looking for someone's name, I could use one of these tools to locate their name, every instance of it, and then if I have to change it or something, I could do that too. So just remember, tools in the editing group allow you to sift through large amounts of text and look for and select specific things. And we'll talk about that in Word 2 next week. Now, the last thing I'd like to do is talk about your spelling and grammar check tool, because we use this so often in Word. Now, spelling and grammar check is going to be in a different tab. It's going to be in your review tab, because typically we do this in a review stage. All right, so I'm going to purposely sabotage this list here. All right, that's good enough. We have 4 spelling errors. So when you're using Microsoft Word and as you're typing, if you misspell a word, Word's going to catch it, typically, not always, but it's going to catch it and indicate it with a red squiggly underline, like we see here. So in real time, as you're typing, it's going to catch these spelling errors. Now, you can change them as you're typing if you want, but it's usually fastest to just type your whole document and then go back and review it for errors and change them in one workflow, hence the review tab. So in the review tab, over to the left, all the way in the proofing group, all the way over is the spelling and grammar check tool. All right, now I usually set up my insertion point at the beginning of the document, all the way at the beginning. Why do I do that? Because spell check will start wherever the insertion point is. So if it's before feeding, it's going to start with this error. It will eventually circle back to whatever's before it. Okay, but I just find it easier to follow if I'm starting at the actual beginning of the document and completing at the actual end of the document. It's just kind of easier for me to keep track of my changes as I go through. All right, so I'm going to set up my insertion point at the beginning, and then I'm going to click on spelling and grammar to run my spelling and grammar check. Now, if you've ever used spell check before, not much has really changed. It just looks a little bit different in 2019 here in this version. So on the right side, we get our proofing pane, P-A-N-E, like a window pane, right? Proofing pane. And it's going to just, first it shows us the error, the way it's currently spelled in the document. And then it's going to give us a list of suggested spellings, what it thinks we're trying to spell. Sometimes you get one, sometimes you get more than one. And if you mess up the word really badly, you won't get any suggestions because it doesn't know what you're trying to spell. In those cases, you have to figure it out yourself. All right. And usually the likeliest suggestion is going to be at the top of the list. And there are a few other features in here. We'll talk about them as we go through. So it's very simple. So it starts off with snowman. All you have to do to change it to the correct spelling is click the suggested spelling from the list. So I'll click on snowman here, and then it'll move on to the next error. So it updated in my document, as you can see, snowman. Now it moves on to feeding. Once again, this time I get 3 suggestions. The one I need is the first one. I'll click on it. Next is hibernating. I'll click on that suggested spelling. And notice sometimes it gives you definitions too, in case you're not sure what the spelling you need. And then chocolate. Now, before I click on this one, I want to point out to the right side of each suggestion is a drop down. And in that drop down is a tool called Change All. So if you made this same spelling error, the same exact spelling error, several times in your document, okay, you don't have to change each one individually. If you click Change All, it's going to change all of those every instance of that misspelling in one shot. So if I spell chocolate this way 20 times, it's going to change all 20 with just the one click of the Change All. All right. So let me click on that, and I'll click OK. Now, on your end, something may have happened, or actually, I should have, let me touch on this now in case you're curious. And if you're confused, I apologize. It may have flagged your name as an error. Okay, so let me touch on that right now. In fact, let me just pretend my name is spelled this way, and then we'll run our spelling grammar check. Perfect. So sometimes Word will think things are spelling errors, but they're not. Okay, this happens a lot with like last names, because last names are unique. They're not found in the dictionary. Word thinks they're errors. They're not. It's just your last name. So you can ignore it and get rid of that squiggly line and then move on to the next error. However, your ignore tools are down here. But what you may want to consider is the add to dictionary tool. So something like a last name, you're going to presumably you'll be using your name in future documents, not just this one. So if you add it to the dictionary, it's going to be in Word's dictionary, and in the future, it will no longer flag it as an error. If you click ignore, it's going to ignore it for this document, but in the next one, it's going to flag it again. But by adding it to the dictionary, you're ensuring that it no longer flags your name as a spelling error, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be your name. Maybe it's the name of your business. Sometimes businesses have a kind of an unconventional spelling. Anything, okay? If you want to add it to the dictionary so it no longer flags it as an error, you could do that by clicking on Add to Dictionary. But I'm going to change it back to my correct spelling, and there we go. All right, and it will also pick up on grammar and kind of style errors. So for example, if I accidentally put an extra space between my first and last name, notice the blue underline. Okay, blue underline is usually a grammar error as opposed to a spelling error. Same thing if I run spelling and grammar check. It says grammar, remove extra space between words. And I do that by clicking on the suggestion. And now it's fixed. All right, so just keep in mind that it will pick up on those other errors as well. But as I always advise patrons here at the library, never rely on spelling and grammar check for everything. You should still always proofread your work, because there are some errors that Word will not notice and that you will have to fix yourself. And we'll see a good example of that in Word 2 next week. All right, now that everything is, we've reviewed it for errors, we've fixed our spelling mistakes. Now we're happy with everything. We can go ahead and maybe print our work if we want. So if you want to print, first I would recommend just doing one last save. To print, you go to your File menu and go down to Print. And that's going to take you first to your print preview screen here. All right, and you can see it's showing me both pages. Just to give you one last preview, make sure everything looks good. You can zoom in onto one or one page at a time if you want to see it more closely. There's a zoom level down there. All right, and just a few features to remember when you print. You can print more than one copy at a time by changing the number of copies here. You can also remember you can print specific page ranges. So under settings, where it says print all pages, okay, you can go to custom print here, but you really don't even have to do that. You can just click right into the pages box, and it will just automatically change it to custom print once you start typing. So if I want to, let's say this was 10 pages. If I want to print only pages 1 through 5, I can put in 1-5, and it will only print pages 1 through 5 and leave the other ones out. You can also do non-consecutive pages. So if I want to print pages 1, 4, and 7, I could put in 1, space 4, space 7, and we'll only print out those specific pages. All right, and then a few, some other of these page setup options that we see down here, we're going to talk about them in Word 2 next week. Margins, okay, orientation. So once you're happy with, if you're happy with the way it looks, you just go ahead and click on the big print button, comes out of your printers, provided everything's hooked up correctly, and you're all set to go. All right, so at this point, if you have any further questions about Microsoft Word, I would go ahead, or at least any other questions about this class, go ahead and direct them through GoToMeeting. Click on that chat bubble, select Organizer Only, type in your question, hit send. All right, and in the meantime, I'll go through a few closing remarks, and then we'll be all set for the day. All right, but the big takeaway for Word 1 here is really the importance of that insertion point. All right, it really dictates so many things, where things go, what's going to be changed, okay, what's going to be moved, etc. All right, so thank you for coming to Word 1 today. The next class in our Word series will be Word 2 next Thursday, February 10th at 10 a.m. And we're going to work with some more tabs in the ribbon. We're going to and explore many extra features to help you create a professional looking document. So in Word 2, we're going to kick it up a notch. We're going to look at an existing document, and we're going to improve it by changing several things about it. And it's also we'll also do a few things to get us set up for Word 3, where we build a newsletter. All right, now remember that this class was recorded. It will be available on our library's YouTube channel in our computer instruction playlist. Okay, so to get there, visit our website at mcl.org. Click on the YouTube icon at the top left of the homepage. That will take you to our YouTube channel, and once you're there, select playlists and then go to computer instruction. Now, remember I told you that we have handouts for our classes, including this one. So to get to those handouts, go to our website at mcl.org. On our main menu, click on Services, and then select Technology Instruction. Once you're on the Technology Instruction webpage, scroll down a bit and you'll see all the handouts listed by the name of the class. All right. And when you're on the technology instruction page, just something to keep in mind from that page, another thing you can do is you can actually use it to sign up for more classes. So there are a couple of links on that page. You'll see register, one for in-person, you'll see another one for online. It doesn't matter which one you click. They both take you to the same computer class calendar on our events page, where you can scroll through and sign up for whatever classes interest you. And remember, you can retake classes. So if you want to take this again next month, you're welcome to do that. All right, and just keep in mind that right now, all classes and other library programs are virtual only. Hopefully we'll be offering some in-person options again on February 14th. All right, and also from that computer class calendar, you'll find virtual private sessions, okay, where we work with just you individually on a computer project you might need some help with, okay, or in some cases, we can even help you troubleshoot your device. All right, so these take place on select Fridays between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Again, I just want to reiterate that these are virtual only, at least right now. It works just like this does over GoToMeeting. All right, so just find private sessions in that calendar and follow the link and then follow the instructions to book your appointment. If you have any other questions about our technology instruction program, classes, registration, anything like that, you can always send us an email to techclass@mcl.org. techclass@mcl.org. Now, at this time, if you have no further questions about today's class or anything, you can click on the X in the upper right-hand corner of the GoToMeeting window and then select Leave Meeting. If you are leaving us, thanks for coming today, and we hope to see you again in class very soon. Take care.